Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Improving System Upgrades and Patching Using SolarWinds. I'm Mark Smith on the Government Marketing team, and I'll be the host for today's event. We'll get started in a moment, but first let's cover a few housekeeping items. The webcast is being recorded and will be sent out in a few days along with slides. I'd also like to introduce Sean Martinez from the Government Sales Engineering team, who'll be presenting our content today. Sean, please take it away from here.
Thank you, Mark. As mentioned, my name is Sean Martinez, and I'm the Technical Account Manager here at SolarWinds. Been a SolarWinds employee here for about 12 years, and I've been supporting the SolarWinds toolset and portfolio here for about just as long here. As he mentioned, today we're going to be going over areas of improving system upgrades and patching utilizing the SolarWinds and SolarWinds tools. Now, like I mentioned, here's my information here as the Technical Account Manager. If you have any questions, like he mentioned, you can always ask the question during this session here. We also, feel free to ask questions afterwards. You can we'll have contact at the end here in case you do want to do something offline. But real quick here's kind of the agenda of what we're going to be going over today. We're going to be going over obviously the overview of SolarWinds as a whole, and then the areas of what we're going to be covering specifically today. Areas around vulnerability, as to patching of systems. And this is patching of not only just network devices, but also patching of servers, systems, and applications. Since monitoring and addressing these vulnerabilities has become a norm, especially today being Patch Tuesday, this is a very important day where we're not only just trying to figure out what patches are becoming available, but also trying to figure out the schedulability of those patches. There might be supersedence because of issues and bugs that they might identify. It's been a very common issue. And so we'll definitely be going over those little gotchas, lessons learned, so that way as you do some sort of patching system, you can actually go ahead and go through areas of scheduling and making sure that we can recall or update these patches as they're going through the system. And it's definitely a lot of our best practices. And there's definitely going to be a lot of demonstration here after this quick PowerPoint. And then also we're going to have, like I mentioned, a resource and Q&A area to cover up any last areas in here. Now, real quick, we always like to go over SolarWinds at a glance. We started SolarWinds as a network monitoring back in 1999, moved into areas from network monitoring to configuration with our network configuration manager, moved into system monitoring, virtualization, and also the ability of giving us information as to what's going on with system configuration, virtualization, hybrid IT going into your cloud deployment for monitoring and making sure we can see it and give you identification of these different areas. And one of the things that we have is a very large deployment with our products. We do have over 150,000 registered customers in our community site. That's actually one of the areas I always recommend to customers that they utilize, because in case you do want to talk about areas of customization, since we are talking about patching, we might have one-off patches for specific applications. And so by taking advantage of those, the THWAC community definitely will help you to leverage what other customers have utilized. You can see what we have available. I also post a lot in there for guides and other areas so that we can get a lot of information. And we have a lot of customers that deploy every branch of the DoD, and Department of Defense, and civilian agencies, state, local, federal government, education, different various areas. Definitely, I always say at the end of the day, we were focused around IT infrastructure, but as we can technically monitor anything IT capable. So some customers might monitor network devices, servers, applications. Some other customers might be monitoring environmentals like UPSs, printers, sensor information, monitoring actual devices up in the air or undersea is actually some of the capabilities we've seen. And so, like I mentioned, one of the things that we built with our products is the ability for you to be able to, utilize our tools very quickly. One of the things that we'll be going over here is all our Patch Manager, our Server Configuration Manager, as well as our Network Configuration Manager. So everything that we have we'll be going over in here has been built because we focused on addressing these needs or issues. Our Patch Manager came from a Microsoft MVP doing Windows patches. We've been doing our server or network patching has been very well known for the last about 10-15 years. for deployment, and we actually just introduced our server configuration. But everything we do is best based upon what you as the community have given to us, is basically saying we need this built into the product. And so that's the reason why we tried this, to make this easy to deploy, easy to utilize, so that way you get some sort of usability out of the product very quickly. I always say usability throughout the evaluation, so that way if we choose, you can change it from evaluation to production just as easily. And that's kind of one of the simple and powerful features of our product, is that you can install and move to from evaluation to production on demand. You can definitely scale to any scope and size. We have a lot of customers that have small installations just for lab environments, offline secure facilities. We do have very large agency-wide installations. So whether you are encompassing or monitoring just 10 or 20 devices, or 100 or 1,000 devices or more, we have the capability of definitely monitoring and giving you that ability of visibility and a lot of configuration and orchestration ability within a lot of our tools in here. At the bottom, you can kind of see some of the notable examples. Like, those are more visualization, talking about network insight, application insight, network path, application stack. Those are all different mapping tools or dynamic tools we built into our product set, so that as you kind of go around your different areas or focuses around your area of responsibility, we kind of give you this dynamic collection of tools as you kind of click them together. And so one of the things that we definitely want to make sure we're going over here is the vulnerability or vulnerability management lifecycle. We actually utilize this graphic here on the right side quite a bit, because this is a cybersecurity type of issue that we always have to apply to. So if you've been to some of my previous talks about ransomware, if you've been to some of my previous talks about real-time response, the wheel is pretty common, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is identify our infrastructure, protect, make sure the applications are secured, detect if there's any issues with accessibility, authentication issues, respond to those events, and then verify through logging, audit. We have auditors that might come on site, or just because of an incident, we need to have that reporting capability. And so that's one of the things we try to build in throughout all these talks here is, as we talk through our tools, like I mentioned, especially in our Network Configuration Manager and our patch and server configuration, one of the first areas is to identify or define what you have in your environment. So whether it is seeing the network devices that we have, the version that's installed, same thing with servers, what OS is installed, what applications installed, and then also the ability of protecting. So with network devices, talking about checking your configurations or checking the firmware version against the CVE for NIST, letting us know, is there some sort of vulnerability we need to respond to, maybe because of cryptography issues, certain vulnerability, checking to see if there's a nuance in a configuration we might have enabled that might have set us up for vulnerability. I know there's a recent one with CDP having 5 vulnerabilities for network devices. Same thing with Windows 7 having, or all Windows editions, in that crypto API bug that just came out in January. So a lot of big issues that have come out, and definitely making sure those, if those are defined, being able to definitely protect and detect to make sure if they are set up, are they set up to only specific areas, which devices are they on, and then having that compliance reportability. So that way, if we are responding to some sort of security incident, insider threat, outsider, state foreign actor, what have you, you have all that information centralized into these different various tools and visibility. And so definitely, like I said, this always comes back to best practices. And even though this is a server and application, I always say this kind of falls into different areas of IT, because you can definitely apply to the network. Definitely discovering to see what you have in your inventory with your systems, especially the servers and workstations. Like I mentioned, applications have become a big issue with whether it is monitoring your antiviruses for making sure those are obviously up to date, but Adobe products, Flash, Shockwave, Chrome, Firefox, a lot of your browsers, maybe some custom applications. And so that's the capability that you need to have accessibility to, is to be able to either do an in-house upgrade, but also be able to install so that if there is any, that way we're not having to do one-off installs. because that becomes one of the other issues here in our next product step is that comprehensive audit. If there's a lot of one-off installations and one-off tools, we're then having to support, if there's 100 tools, 100 systems, having to support that becomes very difficult. So by having a commonality and aggregation point, like a patch manager, configuration tool, compliance tool, helps us to kind of get a handle of what's going on with the systems. Not only in just the patching side, but also in the logging side. Because that's the other area of this is, we'll apply the patches or updates, but we also need to verify that those updates have worked. Like I mentioned, there's been a lot of bugs with, Windows updates and other systems, and so by monitoring for Windows event IDs to see if there's any application crashes is also a good area. And that's actually where it says, leveraging automation, definitely testing and verifying patches in the environment. Because at the end of the day, you have to definitely test these patches these days, because as much as these are pre-tested, there's a lot of nuances, issues. I've seen in the last 6 months areas where you could lose your printer, you could lose your sound, you could lose core services of what would be in the operating system or the firmware because of some sort of cumulative update was deployed without testing, and then 5 or 6 supersedence updates later, that was finally addressed maybe 2 weeks. So by having that visibility of definitely rolling out in stages, but then also being able to maybe pause or segmenting out our systems definitely becomes important, because then, as we verify, we can then go into that scheduling and maybe pause because there's an issue. The next area is definitely that unnecessary patching, because definitely, like I said, the untested patching does cause stability issues. A lot of customers I see kind of just want to do a mass approval without kind of looking to see maybe, I could do mass approval, or maybe I need to just focus on just those supersedence. And I'll show you how you can actually manipulate the view with supersedence in Patch Manager so that we can just show us just the most up-to-date a little bit later. Like I said, compliance is a huge one, because definitely when we talk about servers, virtual machines, network devices, we definitely want to make sure we have a common deployment, because, like I said, the unsustainability of one-offs becomes very difficult, especially with patching and updates. And so definitely having this centralization will help you. And then having the ability, like I said, to schedule so that we can definitely avoid errors, because, I don't want to deploy my first cumulative update set to my domain controllers or my certificate authority or my web server application server, because if that goes down, they're going to be knocking at my door, and then it'll be my job for that to be up and online. I can't move from my desk until that's back up and online. So by setting some sort of tiering system for these patches is now becoming one of the best practice ideas, definitely when you leverage this type of deployment. And then definitely monitoring the applications, because at the end of the day, when we deploy patches, if you look at even processor patches, if in the newest microcode updates, I think in January, some patches could incorporate another 5% loss in your CPU capabilities. So, with visualizing that, you can actually see a little bit more about what's going on with the server application monitor. Now, going on the configuration side, especially with the network devices, so, like I said, this definitely applies to networks, but also to servers, talking about having a compliance policy, making sure that there's something that is streamlined. Because when we talk about systems, we want to make sure we group it by commonalities. I always say utilize groups, utilize custom properties, so that way, whether we're utilizing a dynamic map, or let's say that we're utilizing role-based access, those could also be set as filters so that whenever the user logs in, they only just see those subset systems. So that way they can focus on just their area of responsibility, and then they can then see from their point of view, was there any changes, whether it was a registry change, file change, was there a web server change because of a Windows update, because of a security, maybe there was some sort of CVE that we saw, and so we had to respond to that change. And because of that small change, you don't realize that could have incrementally caused poor websites, slowness, SQL connection errors, retransmission in application packets. So a lot of those do cause issues. And that's the reason why, they'll have the NIST vulnerability website, which we actually do link to throughout a lot of our product. But they'll actually say in there, is there any areas that there'll be impact with those systems? And that's why I say definitely look at those links. And that's the good thing is that definitely if you're looking at our Network Configuration Manager and our Patch Manager, both of those reference the CVE database system. So that way you can reference to see what, what system, what do these patches mean to us, vulnerabilities, more about that impact score. So that way, you can definitely do that lookup for more information. Now, this is kind of good information in here. Like I said, the different areas that they cover for the ability for you to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover of your infrastructure. We just like to give you kind of a quick visuality because we do have a lot of customers that already have some of our tools, utilize some of them, or have kind of seen some in the past. And so I kind of want to show you kind of different areas of, with our, like I mentioned, we're going to be covering the Patch Manager, which covers that protect, detect, and recover. Also our Server Configuration Manager, which does identify, protect, and detect. And also our Network Configuration Manager, which kind of spans all those different areas because we have the ability of definitely identifying, detecting, responding to some sort of configuration change events. There's that automated real-time response. And so that recover response kind of goes across all of those different areas in the system. Like I mentioned, there's other tools that you can see in here. So if you have like our user device tracker, our our backup tools, access rights, you can kind of see where they kind of also can be utilized and overlaid with our cybersecurity set here. Great. So yeah, I want to go into the patching here for configuration. So like I mentioned, just the Patch Manager itself. So to give more information about Patch Manager, it's not designed to rip and replace patching. We have a lot of customers that have WSUS or the SCCM or the Microsoft System Server Center Manager. So you can utilize the WSUS or the SCCM. The nice part is that we can work with either or so that you can overlay our product and give you a lot of accessibility information because it's designed to actually centralize and also be able to orchestrate a lot of these patches so that you can set up patches for your Microsoft, but also third party. So like I was mentioning with browsers, so with my Opera, my Firefox, my Chrome, all my browsers that I'm managing across my domain, they might have one-off installs, but I want to make sure they're being seamlessly upgraded. So I'm managing that through my Patch Manager. Same thing with Oracle, with the Oracle JDK, the player that might be on the system. Do I need to update on that system? In the patch rules, we can actually set up to uninstall a previous application before it installs that next version. I know that's one rule by Oracle that for the Java that you need, and so that's definitely one area that you can utilize as an additional rule. In addition to you have the capability of creating custom patches, so you're not limited to just some of the ones that we have in here. As long as maybe we need to check for a registry, a file age, file version number to see do we need to install this on the system, or just doing a blank install, we can actually go ahead and you can create and push out those type of updates to your systems to help streamline this to all of your devices. Like I mentioned, because at the end of the day, it helps you to mass scale this so that it gives you the best really just return on time, because if I'm having to install Acrobat Reader, that's a 45-minute process sitting in front of a computer with the DVD on that system waiting for it to happen to run. But if I could have it as a patch running as an MSI, it could install the patch, it could run as a scheduled task, and then because of the role of that computer, it automatically got installed because they were a part of the finance or some other team that they're supposed to. So that could actually be one of the areas is automating that because of the application, but also setting the groups and roles of the workstations and servers that they'll be defined to so that they automatically install, based upon the area of their focus. And that's kind of the nice thing is that it could definitely help decrease the security risk because at the end of the day, we're not having to do those one-offs, multiple versions being supported. Everything is being seamlessly updated because you centralized everything. And then you can automate, just the updates of patches, but then also run audits of what's installed on that system or server or workstation, what applications were installed, printers, users. There's a lot of different areas for running kind of WMI calls against your server or workstation to see information even down to the BIOS and the service tag. So there's a lot of information, and that all runs agentless for the majority of the tasks in there. We do give an optional agent, but majority of the customers, even myself, run agentless because when I want to do my browser updates and everything, it just does it through the Windows update, so I'm not having to do anything additional, and I'll handle those tasks. Jumping from the patching, now going over into the configuration. So server configuration is one of our newest modules in our Orion platform. This is focused around the servers. We've had it for years for our network configuration manager. We're just introducing it now for our server side. So it's designed to detect, alert, and report on file changes, script changes, and registry changes. So it's great because there's default monitors for hardware inventory, software inventory, and things like IaaS. But then I can go out and say, I want you to monitor things like my NTP server. You know, my NTP server on my domain controllers, those areas shouldn't be modified or changed at any time because, you know, if the primary domain controller, master time server changes, it can start causing issues with the certificate authority, and then suddenly everyone's starting to get locked out of applications. So that's kind of one of the areas that we could definitely monitor is registries, but also like PowerShell scripts. So running scripts for script outputs and then monitoring to see was there a change. Not just monitoring to see was there a change, but also letting us know who made that change. So we'll actually connect to Active Directory to let us know what user made that change at that time. And I'll kind of show you that through the demo too, because maybe it was local system, maybe it was an actual user. So you actually can see, was there something that was done because of an internal task or because of an actual user was making those changes. And then you can definitely correlate and look at all the changes happening historically. And then there's always the alerting system. So if there was a change to a sensitive file, sensitive directory, sensitive server, I want to go ahead and have some sort of alerting task with that system so that be notified. Now jumping from the server side over to our configuration manager. So like I mentioned, this definitely covers a lot of the things that I talked about on the server side over to our network devices. So the ability for you to kind of streamline, make sure everything's kind of common and compliance is great. It is all around kind of our network configuration manager. This one kind of goes a step further because it does also have a full comprehensive compliance report system that that's kind of built in the system, so that we can kind of get a streamlined output visibility view, but also identify stuff by informational warning critical, or let's say we need to identify it by category 1, 2, or 3 for that type of vulnerability tiering. So you can go ahead and set up those type of issues for those configurations. There's also the ability for you to set up baselines, so if there's been any change within the entire configuration or a small subset, I can go ahead and see on demand when an alert person actually leaves configuration terminal, that I usually get the information within about a minute of this is the user, this is the system they logged in from, and these are the lines that they modified. So then I, as the manager, can actually then go into the system and actually then deploy or roll back that update if we need to. Now, there's also the ability for you to bulk standardize the configurations across your network, so that way we can make sure that we kill all those configurations. Once again, by utilizing custom properties or groups, you can also subset those devices so that based upon their role, maybe they're a WAN, a layer 2, a layer 3 device, they're able to, you can subset those devices based upon the role. Edge, WAN, core, once again, grouping them based upon their access control list, different rules. And that's the nice area with the configuration manager, is that you can do a global configuration check or a subset check. So let's say I need to check per interface for those configurations or per access control to check that configuration. You have that flexibility of setting those as a compliance rule so that we can then detect and either identify or detect and automatically respond. There is an automatic response that is available in Network Configuration Manager so that you have the capability of actually going out. The system can actually sense that there was a change, and then automatically apply your known rules back to that network device. So that could be an automatic orchestration, especially for those more severe events or the common ones, so that you don't have to do one-off. Or you can just kind of run the report, and it will let you know, and then you actually about the number of devices, and there's actually a workflow to actually go and apply it on demand or scheduled to those devices. And then there's other areas about network inventory. That way you see a little bit more about the assets, about what they have. And then also the ability of kind of giving you especially around the CVEs. We focus around a lot around your Cisco iOS, ASA, Nexus, and Juniper devices. That way you can see a little bit more about that CVE information. And then we also have a lot more about the network devices. There's some more about ACLs, and that covers around areas like Cisco, Palo Alto, Juniper, HP, S5, and a little bit more of those devices in there. Great. So I know I've been talking a lot here at the system, so let me go ahead and jump us over to the demo real quick. Great. So the first product I wanted to go ahead and just bring up in here was our first product that we talked on was the Patch Manager. So the way I have in here is that this is my Patch Manager system, and this is actually connected to my WSUS server. So like I mentioned, you can connect through the WSUS, and you can see it kind of gives you the same feel, function, and workflow as WSUS. You can also connect through SCCM, and with SCCM, there'll actually be a link you can utilize on that application. In addition to, you can also have this application as it's a Microsoft Management Console running locally on your workstation. So you have multiple options or actions available to you. Now in the system, like I said, this gives a lot of the same workflow, function, and action. So I can always go in here, go into approve, decline, delete patches, apply it to systems. When you're applying it to systems, it's the same way of applying it to it's either an organizational group or the individual computer groups that you've assigned. So you have that flexibility setting those up. And then you have the workflow of, do I want to install this? Do I want to have this optional installed? Do I need to set a deadline? But in here, there's one additional action we've added, which is this ability to schedule. So let's say that, like I said, if there's an issue with some of these patches, maybe we need to, have that possibility of maybe delaying or have some sort of callback. So you can definitely set up a schedule system to say, I want you to run, one time at this specific time, and then you can set it to run at that one-time occurrence. And then once you hit the next, hit finish, it'll then apply it to our scheduled tasks system over here on the lower left. So that kind of gives you one of those accessibility areas so that, like I said, we can then approve and start some sort of workflow of scheduling patches. But if we ever need to, we can go back over here into that scheduling to go ahead and just call those back on demand. Great. So here you kind of saw, this real quick. So here we have all the patches. One of the areas with this product is that you can also drag and drop for on your tabs to definitely sort and filter. So this is probably the biggest one I do is I'll go into the supersedence and I'll just drag and drop it. So that way I can see is there anything that's kind of the newest on the system or standalone. I can get those as a patch overview. It's nice because that way I can see a little bit more on demand. Like I said, do that approve or decline, and then you have that filter ability. You do have the ability of creating your own filters. So what I did was on this one, I created this failed updates. You can actually create a new update so that if the source comes from Microsoft, the internal Microsoft patches, only those third-party patches that we include with our product, or a mix of the two. And then you have the additional workflow that you see in WSUS where you can set up filters based upon service pack, criticality level, areas like that. You have that flexibility of setting those reports. Now, one of the other big areas in the system is with WSUS, I know it tells you to install all these additional report tools so that you can get some sort of information about what updates need to be installed on your systems or servers. We include all that automatically. So you can see here, I clicked on all my servers that are clustered that just need update, and it's showing me just my SQL server. So real quick, I could see as an overview of the whole group or individually servers, what updates are needed and what updates do I need to apply to this system. So I had that summary report to see how many patches were needed. Clicked on that update details. Now what I usually do is I'll filter by is it not approved, and then once again by supersedence. So here hey, look at that. So maybe I need to maybe I want to deploy this patch here, this upgrade to this system. So here we can go ahead and click approve, set that approver or not, and then go ahead and define it to that group as we need to. And so that's kind of one of the nice things is that you can saw actually when I selected that one patch, it was actually listed as Firefox. So about an hour before this call, I actually downloaded and published it to my system. All I had to do was all my Patch Manager system does is it calls into the SolarWinds server to see is there any new updates with all our vendors. What our check is doing is actually letting us know, because we check to see, is what registry changes there were, things, so that when we push out these updates like Firefox and Chrome, you're not having to do a lot of customization. It's just kind of download, deploy to your workstations or servers as you need to. So you definitely do have that capability of setting that up and just kind of deploying, or you can go and customize that to do a more one-off if we need to. Quick, hit refresh. So we can definitely go into all these patches and definitely just push out for the upgrade. Now, one of the other areas in here, and the reason why I want to go back to this real quick, is you'll notice that these patches that I've actually selected, both of these say, Mozilla Firefox, 32-bit or 64-bit. So we actually do tell you the architecture applies to. And then you'll also notice it says in parentheses upgrade. So if we are to actually edit this this update, it would actually let us know that the update has the information as to checking to make sure that there was a previous version installed before we installed this new version. That's the reason why at the bottom here you'll also notice that there's also the same version without that upgrade in parentheses. So what's nice about this is that if the servers or workstations have never had the product installed, I can then just go ahead and approve, and then it'll just do that new install and then deploy it out to my systems. So that's one of the areas that we kind of give you as an area for flexibility for you to kind of deploy the patches that we as a vendor make available for these systems. Now, with all these updates, usually the way it works is that a patch comes out from the vendor. We usually will have the information out within I always say with about 72 to 96 hours after that vendor update, because if it comes out on a Friday or sometime, we have to go take various checks to make sure version or other areas are checked for those patches. So just be aware about that. And also, with the third-party patches, all of them will be shown here under the software publishing. So you can go under the all patches. It'll go reach out to the systems. Yeah, let's see here. Click back and forth. So you can see here, this is showing me like all the ones that's showing me like Adobe Acrobat, Dell patches, what other vendors I've also selected. So this is kind of showing me a lot of the updates that I've kind of brought into the system. And you can see some of most, even BIOS updates from companies like Dell, chipset drivers. So a lot of these drivers and areas are definitely kind of included into our system. On Thwack, and actually if you go to our site, we do have a third-party supported updates history. Will actually show you the vendors we support, the most up-to-date versions, as well as a history check of when that came out and when it was available for you. Great. So since we've been touching on the Patch Manager, I want to go ahead and jump over into our other area here real quick. So since we've talked about servers, I want to touch on our newest product, our Server Configuration Manager. So our Server Configuration Manager, this one is, like I mentioned, one of our newest products that we've introduced. We introduced this because customers came to us saying, you do such a great capability with network devices and compliance. Can you do the same on servers? And so that's why we've introduced this. So that's the reason why we actually, in our newest version, you'll actually see it says you have the capability of now monitoring Linux hardware, software, and files. Now, that's kind of the nice thing with our Server Configuration Manager is that, unlike our Patch Manager, our SolarWinds Patch Manager, unfortunately, only supports Microsoft and Windows operating systems. So our Patch Manager, unfortunately, does not support Linux, Unix systems. Actually, I tell customers utilize a Network Configuration Manager because they can utilize SSH to actually make those configuration updates through apt-get. But with the Server Configuration Manager, Server Configuration Monitor, it's only monitors right now, it has the ability of monitoring Windows as well as Linux, Unix systems, and this actually utilizes our agents. And that's probably one of the areas that you'll actually see in our settings, is that this does require the agent to be able to run a lot of these server profiles, these server areas. Because what this is doing is that this is doing a lot of PowerShell scripts, other scripts, and it wants to run it locally so that we can see these times and kind of send it back on demand. So you'll notice that as you kind of work through a lot of the workflow of assigning profiles, assigning systems, it will ask you to deploy those agents. And like I mentioned, it does support Windows, Linux, Unix. Also with the Linux, Unix, we do support ARM-based processors. So in case you have like any Raspberry Pi IoT systems, that's also capable as well. With the defaults in our configuration, so let me bring up the server real quick. So our default configuration, like I mentioned, it's going to go ahead and support server as well as hardware configuration. And operating system information. So once installed in the operating system, Windows updates, hardware information, so hardware asset inventory will also be reported in here. Now, because I did select the server, it actually does automatically take us to that node details page. So you'll notice that it's saying, here I'm on my one of my domain controllers hosted by my virtual machine, but it automatically took us under that node details under that server configuration. So if you have other modules like our server and application, maybe network performance, it's just kind of a sub-tab that we'll add in there to kind of give you that visibility and information. But here's some of the rules that I actually have checked. Like I said, default is hardware and software inventory. So here I have things like drivers, drives, interfaces, processors. So, video cards. Have any of these changed? Have there been any, new updates that have been applied to the system? I can go ahead and click on that area subset to see when was a change before and after, and maybe what file version or what have changed on that system. So this gives us a great capability because, like I said, you can overlay this to server and application monitor so that we can understand a little better as to why we see a sudden, jump in that performance or loss in performance. So you can get that overlay. Yeah, we can see here. So it just ran the report. It said because it's previous scan in October to on January 24th, says that there was a version change with this one agent. So we can see, maybe there's a change, install date, all that was being tracked in the system. That's kind of the nice thing is that it goes to just that one subset. And that's kind of what it's showing us in here is maybe there's other lines that were unchanged or changed in the system. So you can actually click to see other areas or other maybe other applications that are maybe installed with that system around the same time. One of the other ones I threw in here, this is a couple custom ones I've created. One was network time. Like I mentioned, this is the domain controller, right? So if someone touches my time server, changes the system it points to, any of these areas, I definitely want to be monitored or be notified about those changes. Now, I just did a base monitor on the entire HKey local machine all the way down to here. So all of these were automatically included as well as any subfolders. So that's the reason why you see all the last known good time is every time there's maybe a change it's been applied is because I didn't do a specific set, but it's showing me all of the settings in there. So you can definitely filter to those specific ones if we ever need to, in case we want to check specific ones. But I just want to kind of do a mass monitor in here for this demonstration here for you. Let's go take a look at some of the other ones that we also have. Like I mentioned, we also have IIS. So with IIS, we monitor things like your web config, machine config files. So we're monitoring the iNet pub as well as the 64, the .NET configuration file. One of my guides I posted a few years ago, it's called Orion Slow Website Issues. The guide still applies today. And one of the areas it talks about is modifying this configuration file so that you don't wait 2 minutes before that website pops up. So here we can actually see, maybe someone did modify that file and we did have some performance issues. Here we could see before and after what changed and also what user might have made the change. Now let me go here real quick. I'm going to go to our assigned profiles. So like I mentioned, we include quite a number of ones out of the box. There's a hardware inventory, IIS, there's Linux Essentials, same thing for security and permissions, as well as software inventory. But you can see I definitely created some out of the, with custom ones. Let me actually bring up the settings real quick. Like I said, this is one of our newest modules, so I just want to kind of show you kind of how you can take advantage of this one really quickly so that you can kind of get some visibility into any of your custom areas. I'll just edit this one real quick. So you can see in here, all I did was all I did was select new. It asked me for a profile, and then it asked me to add an element. This one was asking me to do whether it was a file, registry, PowerShell script, or Linux script. So if I wanted to run like a bash, Python script, you could do so. Or do I need to go a specific file location, registry location, so that way you can kind of run and test these against systems. So that's how I have these set up, is that these are looking at, HQ, local machine, down to the time providers as registry roles. And then after I click save, we can basically then go back to the monitor devices and then just start applying those templates to the servers or workstations that we want to monitor against this system. Here we have under the monitor nodes, like I mentioned, we'll show you, is the agent deployed, and then also the version of the system. Are we monitoring through SNMP, which might be a Linux system? So you have a lot of flexibility, just how we want to monitor and deploy these. I'm monitoring maybe WMI plus the agent, so you can see each one's kind of deployed, plus what template is already deployed to the system. And you can see maybe some of these are currently having issues, so I could jump over to that one to see, what's that issue I'm having, and go and troubleshoot it from there. Great. So I want to make sure I have enough time here for the other product, our Server Configuration Monitor, our Manager. So I'll go ahead and jump over to the last tool. So like I mentioned, our Server Configuration Manager has been known for quite a while, originally known as Cirrus. Well over a decade ago, had a name change. But our Network Configuration Manager has the capability of monitoring your network devices. Like I mentioned, it can also technically update your Linux, Unix servers, because it can run or read SSH telnet commands against systems. And so that's why I always say it does support network devices as its original function, but maybe we do have headless servers that are doing SSH. Maybe we have UPS systems, print servers where we need to run or read commands from telnet or SSH to kind of get a configuration or connectivity. You can go ahead and run that against systems and then have the configuration stored in the database locally or saved as a physical file in case you want a file share. So that way you can get that as some sort of historical document in case we need to fail over, rebuild if we need to, and have that in the system. Now in the Configuration Manager, this is also going to focus around a lot of the identifying what issue or identifying your infrastructure, but also being able to detect what we're seeing issues on as it relates to configuration, downloading, changes. Maybe someone forgot to save the running to start configuration. Maybe there's configuration changes, so we're detecting here about recent changes. There's also the ability there's a full workflow in here in addition to a pending approval system, so that before a user actually makes a change to that network device, there's some sort of approval system before it actually makes that change. Like I mentioned, one of the first ones I always say in here is our network configuration change report. Our real-time change detection report's been known for a very long time, but one of the areas I always like to mention is the fact that when it runs in here, it lets us know the user that it saw on that configuration rule or as it ran, as well as how they accessed. It came in through VTY0 from this IP address. So I can see that this user from this IP address logged in to make, maybe add or modify this DHCP range or modify my access control lists. So this is an on-demand that's built into the Network Configuration Manager, especially for network devices, so that way you have that automated notification and identification about, small changes that, hey, suddenly we've lost a portion of our network. Oh, well, hey, we just saw that in the change report, someone deleted half the VLANs and applied to the system. So you can get that visibility in there. And like I mentioned, since we have the configurations, hopefully you could then just go ahead and roll back to that previous configuration without much issue. And that's actually one of the nice areas in this, is that because we do have those configurations, you can, like I said, roll back if we need to, or maybe we want to create a template. One of the areas with our products I kind of tell customers is that, or customers ask for, is I want to have a blank device template. So what I always recommend to customers is that you can create what's called an external node. An external node is just a placeholder for a device that doesn't exist. But what we could do in that external node is that we could then go into that device and import physical files for those configurations. So that way we could then say, well, that system wasn't online anymore, or I just want to keep a historical record of those configurations. You could then click on them to have that information centralized and accessible, database-wise here in the system. And then because you might be doing network performance or other modules, this is all centralized. So I can click on the breadcrumb at the top here, or just click on that system name to jump from the configuration over into the network performance area of this device. So here I'm looking at this ASA. Maybe this ASA just had a fault or failure issue. So now I need to go to figure out what's going on with the system, reset outages, and that's one of the things is when we include maybe some of our other modules you have, like network performance or server and application, you can go back to that configuration area. So network configuration manager, server configuration monitor, both of them will have a configs tab taking you back from the performance over to the configurations area. And then one of the last areas in here is, like I said, to definitely detect or identify security problems or faults with the system. One of the biggest things I spend a lot of my talks on when I do, whether it's a webinar, I do on-site talks at shows and conventions, it talks especially around our network compliance portability system. It's probably been one of the biggest areas where customers care about. I want to make sure that everything is commonly configured. I want to make sure that there is identify issues as to the configurations. If something's not applied correctly, something's misconfigured, I want to be aware about it, but also have the workflow of taking action, or maybe kind of just identifying it later. So that's kind of one of the things that you can modify and create these rules on demand. And that's actually one of the ones I created in here is the security audit. So I'll just run this one real quick. And it will go ahead and give us kind of the output. So green means obviously there's no fault with this configuration, but maybe I forgot to do some configurations. I is the informational or category 3, warning or category 2, and then critical or category 1. So here I could see that, oh, maybe I forgot to do that enable secret on that configuration. Well, first off, there's a link taking us back to the configuration, tells us the number of devices that are in violation, but then the flexibility and capability of executing on just this device or in all devices in violation. So one of the things that we can have a part of the workflow is that if I know I've identified this as a fault and I know that there's going to be a common response, I could actually have this script area pre-done and ready to go so that when I click on that execute, those lines are already set up in here. So I could have configuration terminal, I could have the enable secrets, and all the other additional commands, and then write mem, in here to then go and apply it to all those devices. Like I say, go ahead and execute script, go ahead and make that change. And then you can actually, in the configuration manager, like I mentioned, there's a pending approval system. So if you set your users down to a lower security level, and we mentioned this in the admin guide, once you set the user level login and set to a lower level, you can then take advantage of that, the area of the compliant, the pending approval system. So when they're actually trying to actually make that configuration change, apply that template, that compliance change, execute a script, upload configuration, there's some sort of workflow check and verification so that maybe we want to do a roundtable, maybe we want to have one or multiple managers approve. They could then see who was making what user is making that request. Did they want to do it immediately, scheduled, or sent back to them to do when they were back in the office? And then what commands and what devices were going to be affected on these rules. And so, like I said, all this workflow is built in here so that because, when we are touching on these configurations, you can go ahead and, like I said, have that all kind of reported out in here. Back here real quick. One of the last areas I want to make sure to touch on, like I mentioned earlier with CVE or the vulnerability system. So there is a vulnerability so that we will let you know about vulnerabilities in the Network Configuration Manager. Like I said, Patch Manager has it for your servers, for server patches. Network Configuration Manager, we do actually go out to the NIST site to pull back firmware vulnerabilities based upon the iOS version in your system. So if you ever go to, so under the No Details page, whenever you see like this description or machine type, and we actually pull back the version in here, that's kind of how we're going to be matching that your firmware the firmware vulnerability information. So we're going to go ahead and just reach out to that and go ahead and report it in here. And then it's going to assign a NIST score, 1 through 10, and then have the workflow for you to actually say, I've identified that this is it starts as a potential vulnerability, and then goes through the workflow of confirming it or setting a waiver to reset that vulnerability. So that way you can say, this doesn't apply because maybe it's a configuration nuance that we don't have applied, or maybe that's a core configuration that's integral into the entire routing system because of the way that that CDP rule was deployed. And so you can definitely set up and define those types of areas for the firmware vulnerability. And then one of the last ones in here I always say is the different reports. So these reports are interactive, so I can see what we forgot to back up. So in case I need to modify them, there's a burn down report for that compliance policy system, so that we can see, day over day, are we improving our security posture, or did we suddenly just get a whole bunch of new rules, dropped on our lap that we got now kind of work out? So you can kind of see those. Also, there is a full report on, some of your major reports, so you can kind of identify those. Like I mentioned, I renamed mine Category 1, 2, and 3 because the federal government likes to have that. But you can still it'll be the informational warning critical stage within our policy system. Okay, great. So I know I wanted to keep a couple of minutes open here for Q&A and other areas. So what I want to just go ahead and do is kind of touch on some of the resources. SolarWinds has a lot of information available. I always say at the end of the day, you can go to SolarWinds.com. SolarWinds.com will have a lot of getting things done or getting things accomplished documentation under our support area. If you go under our community, under THWAC, there'll also be a lot of additional areas that there might be of interest in for you as well. There's videos on best practices, especially around areas like Patch Manager, Network Configuration Manager. There's a 30-minute video done by Destiny Bertucci where she talks about NCM compliance. She's been working with that tool for 15 years, and she goes into the areas of meeting compliance and compliance areas. Like I said, there's a lot of different. So if you ever want to see more about what's capable or are the possible with the product, I would say definitely take a look at THWAC, and especially under the events is that SolarWinds Lab. That's where you'll definitely see a lot more of those other areas. And then some of the other ones that we do have are blog posts on patching, change management, vulnerability. We do also have white papers on NIST 853, different areas to talk about compliance, logging. Like I said, we cover different areas like as it accounts to internal threats, insider threats, external threats, responding to faults, real-time response, ransomware response. So just be aware, a lot of this information we try to make available to everybody so that they can best utilize the tools specific to your needs. Great. So I'm going to take a quick look here at the Q&A here. Oh, so it's a great question here. So somebody was asking about in the support in the life. So and that's a great question. So we do have in the support in the life. I was going to say with operating systems with servers, it's automatic because that's just handled by the operating system owners, whether Microsoft, Debian, whoever owns it. But with network devices and systems, we do actually ship with the product a end of life in the support capability to set the dates, or if we don't know what the device is, you can manually set those dates in there. Because, like I mentioned, there might be into support, into sales, into maintenance dates. Each one's different, maybe loss of capabilities or loss of functionality, and then you realize, hey, we just exceeded that loss of support They just came out with a very large bug that might be instrumental to that configuration. So that way you figure out that life cycle for replacement. So that's definitely one area that the Network Configuration Manager will definitely handle for you. Great. Another question. Oh, another question is there a way to run scripts after the patch? So there is in the SolarWinds Patch Manager, there is a package boot assistant tool. When you go and create or edit or modify those packages, you'll notice after that download will be the package boot assistant tool. That tool will be capable of running internal and external scripts. It will ask you, do I want to maybe terminate a process, run a script, check for certain things, and so that is a capability that you can do before and after you run application patches. See here real quick. Let's just checking real quick here on the last areas. So looks like I've pretty much addressed everybody's questions here. Like I mentioned, if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information is here on the page. Like I said, my name is Sean Martinez. I'm the Technical Account Manager. I do cover areas pre-sales and post-sales, covering areas like architectural deployments, lessons learned, gotchas. Maybe we got to figure out a scope for specific deployments. So feel free to definitely reach out to us at any time. Especially, I always say at the end of the day, if you feel like you want to know more about the tools that you already own, definitely feel free. I always like to give customers educational because you want to make sure that you're utilizing, a lot of customers come to us saying they might utilize 10 or 20% of the product, and I definitely want to educate you about that other 80% of those capabilities. So, like I said, feel free to contact us at any time. But other than that, I hope some of our last contact information here. There's demo site. Like I mentioned, everything I've shown you does come with a full evaluation. The only product that has some sort of limitation is the SolarWinds Patch Manager. It limits what third-party patches deploy. Other than that, everything else is fully open. And then here's some of my other contacts for in case you need contact here. But other than that, like I said, have a great day.